Hello, thank you for joining us. I will go ahead and begin and just kind of go over some pre-bid conference housekeeping guidelines. Should we have any technical difficulties, just want to let you know with the actual webinar itself, we will proceed to audio conference bridge. That information is down below if you want to take a screenshot of that. In the meantime, please, if you'd like, you may change audio by switching between computer audio and phone call. There's the information there in listen only mode. You should all be muted. I do have that automatically set. However, we will not check to see if maybe everybody is able to hear me and our speakers today. If you would please click the raise hand option. And this way I can find out if y'all are all good. And it looks like we are all good to go. Now, want to kind of go over your opportunities to submit any anonymous questions. Please do that in the question and answer section of the control panel. Try to avoid using the chat feature so that we can capture all questions and respond to them appropriately. Finally, this handout has been made via email prior to this session, and if you did not receive it, I will follow up with those who have attended this and present that as well. Otherwise, we will proceed, and I will turn this over to Stephanie.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephanie Harrison. I'm one of the managers with the Chief Procurement Office in the Procurement Services Division at DIR, and I will be presenting most of the topics today through the End-User IT Outsourcing Rfo. I have with me Lynn Hottie and Teresa Williamson, who will help with explain the hub requirements on this. Scott Wilson is also in the Procurement Service Office, and he was assisting on this RFO. Colleen Berkeley is the Director of Procurement Services, and then Beth Perry, who's there mentioned on your slide, is our IT support and will help you all get into the vendor information system if you're not able to gain access immediately. We'll work through those and troubleshoot any questions. Jeff Klein is our Program Director for Statewide EIR Accessibility. Jeff will not be able to join us here today, but I will cover part of the information that you will need to know for the RFO, and then any additional questions, you may send those in through the format that we're going to talk about in the slides here this afternoon. Okay, next slide, please. So just a brief agenda. We're going to go over the RFO, go over the scope, some contents of the RFO, the terms and conditions where you can find that information, the Rfo schedule. Hub will give their presentation, EIR, which is the accessibility portion, and then we'll go over evaluation criteria and some general information. I will also walk you through how to set up your Bidstamp vendor information portal account so you can submit your proposal. We'll go over the mandatory submission requirements, take a quick break, and then come back and we'll go over some of the questions that are submitted during the conference. I do want to say that this, any of the questions that we addressed during the pre-vid conference are unofficial until they come out in Addendum 1, which will be posted as a Q&A document along with any other clarifications that we may need to make for the RFO. This slide deck will also be a part of that addendum and the attendee list for this conference. Next slide, please. The purpose for this request for offer is for DIR to solicit responses from potential vendors for end-user IT outsourcing services. This is for our master contracts through our cooperative contract program. So this is not a solicitation for DIR. It is a solicitation for DIR to make master contracts that our DIR customers will utilize through the cooperative contracts program. DIR intends to make multiple awards from this RFO. Next slide, please. Okay, if you have the RFO in front of you, or if you're open to the ESBD portal, which is where the RFO is posted, you'll see that we have the Rfo Contents described here. There is a bid package 1, which is the RFO itself, which contains exhibits A through D. We have bid package 2, which is the respondent engagement experience. We'll go over that a little bit later. We have a sample DIR contract, which is bid package 3, the current standard terms and conditions, which is bid package 4, our Vpap form, our PDAA form, the vendor references, I'll talk about that, our Edgar form, and then our current MLA and current master operating lease agreement. And then we have a sample statement of work. And we'll walk through which of these are going to be required for you to fill out and send back in, and which of them are there for your reference. Next slide, please. Bid package 1. This is the Rfo itself. It includes the vendor information system, which is our VIS, or you'll hear to me refer it as bid stamp as well. Those are the same thing, VIS or bid stamp. Bid package 1 also contains the scope, general information, your submission requirements, the evaluation, negotiation, and award requirements, our Exhibit A, which is the vendor information form, our Exhibit B, which is vendor history and experience, Exhibit C, which is the contract marketing support plan, and Exhibit D, which is our hub contracting plan, our hub subcontracting plan. All of those exhibits are required documents that will have to be completed and submitted with your response. Next slide, please. So the scope of the RFO. This particular RFO is for services only. Our services include the list you see here, which I'm going to explain a little bit about what each of these are. The provisioning of equipment includes any information technology equipment that may be made commercially available within the current and future technology marketplace that addresses a business need for a customer. The equipment can include, but is not limited to, desktops and workstations, notebooks, portables, mobility devices, end-user support services, storage area networks, networking, software and peripherals, and services can include, but not limited to, management of the equipment, procurement, equipment configuration management, and provisioning of the equipment. Successful respondents must be capable of provisioning equipment using standard configurations developed by the customer. The successful respondent shall also be responsible for bearing the cost of acquisition or lease costs that may be applicable in the procurement process and for IT equipment that may be required by the customer. We also have desktop outsourcing services. This includes services related to desktop computers or laptops acting in the role of desktops, desktop hosting servers, the underlying network infrastructure, the processes, and the organization. The support services for that include desktop dispatch, hardware break-fix services, installations, moves, adds, and changes, remote server, our LAN or WAN services where applicable, shrink-wrap software dispatched efforts, first-level application, enterprise-specific services where applicable, and then IT asset inventory maintenance. I'm still on that previous slide. Then we also have asset tracking services. These are services that maintain a central asset management system to maintain tracking of successful respondent-owned equipment to include, but not limited to, the physical location, users, software licenses, maintenance records, and end-of-agreement term dates. Our support services include service desk services, which are where the vendor would manage and supply a toll-free telephone number, email addresses, or web-based application for the customer to report maintenance issues, trouble tickets, and request other how-to assistance as necessary. This process must include a timely confirmation of receipt of all customer reports and a resolution of status of all services requested submitted. IT Service Desk is defined as a provision of internal end-user support for all IT services and includes labor, facilities, systems, processes, management, and connectivity for service desk support. The service category also, support services also includes on-site support, moves, adds, and changes, or the MAC services. That's kind of self-explanatory. We also include the remote support services, which are services that are managed to provide remote support to take over and support a piece of equipment from a centralized location by the vendor personnel. The vendor shall provide phone support to assist in a resolution of the problems from the customer that is remote to the end user customer. That's becoming very increasingly important, especially with a majority of our current workforce working from home. We also have standard and ad hoc reporting and documentation. This is where the vendor produces various types of reports through online or hard copy and may be required by a customer. These can include, but not limited to, the number of problems or calls logged, number of dispatch calls, and resolution timeframes. We have break fix and maintenance services. This is where the vendor manages support services, including bearing cost for all equipment owned and provided by the successful respondent. This will include, but not limited to, time and materials maintenance, troubleshooting, on-site support function, and upgrading of equipment as needed to provide any new technology features. Next slide, please. We have the unwind end of engagement services, and this is where the vendor would manage the de-installation and packaging of the vendor's provided equipment, to include but not limited to providing a plan to manage the unwind of the services, removal of hard drives, and to be left with a customer for destruction. Then our technology services category includes mobility, which this category defines mobility as a provision of internal end-user support for all mobility functionality. This includes labor, facilities, system processes, management, and connectivity. Managing mobile devices, including bring your own device to work with the customer's network and base systems, and managing mobile device connectivity services. We also have the hosted virtual desktop, or HVD services, which include vendor access to applications from a centralized server combined with a lower cost desktop solution than a thin client option. Network managed services include managing and providing services for network related issues, to include but not limited to connectivity, troubleshooting, eliminating bottlenecks, and monitoring. For DIR eligible telecom customers, telecommunication connectivity services will be achieved through the DIR Consolidated Telecommunications, or the Texan contracts. Then the last two here are software services, where the vendor manages services for software to include, but not limited to, software configuration management, patches, automated distribution, imaging creation, and imaging implementations. And then for security services, where the vendor manages security services applicable to the equipment as described previously, the provisioning of equipment and procurement services that may be provided. These include, but not limited to, firewalls, passwords, and data protection, equipment shipped in a default secure configuration, and the option to keep a hard drive is required within the applicable equipment configuration. Okay, next slide, please. These contracts are a 5-year total contract. So the initial term will be 2 years from the date of signature, and it will be automatically renewed in a 1-year, 2-year renewal, and then an optional 1-year renewal, for a total of 5 years on this contract. Next slide, please. The Rfo schedule. So this RFO was posted last Friday on October 9th. Today we're holding the vendor conference webinar. The deadline for submitting any questions, so you can submit questions today through the Q&A option. You also have the option to submit questions up to 2:00 p.m. Central Time on October 19th. Those questions should be submitted through the vendor portal in the question section, and then those questions will be sent to me for review and response. But you do need to set up your VIS account in order to submit those questions through the portal, and I'll walk you through how to do that in a minute. We anticipate having those questions back out with the answers by October 23rd. That is a tentative date. We will try our best to meet that deadline. All the questions and answers will be posted on the Electronic State Business Daily in the form of an addendum, and that was the addendum that I referred to earlier. It is the vendor's responsibility to check the electronic state business daily for any addendum or changes to the RFO, as DIR is not necessarily required to send you a notification of updates to the ESBD. So please make note of that. November 9th, this is the important deadline for everybody who's wanting to respond. Currently, all responses will be due at 2 p.m. Central Time, November 9th. These do have to be submitted electronically. After 2 p.m., the submission system actually will not allow you to submit. So be sure you plan in advance to get your response submitted on time. We have a deadline to receive the vendor references. I'll go over in detail how those references should come into us. That is also on November 9th at 2 p.m. And then we anticipate starting the evaluation of the responses by November 16th. We will continue the evaluations till all that's completed, and then we will move straight into negotiation and contract awards. And those will continue until DIR has met the need for the state, or we are told for whatever reason to cease negotiations. Let's see, next slide, please. Bid packages bid package 1, exhibits A, B, and C. These all require vendor to complete the form and submit it as a part of your response to the portal. So exhibit A is the vendor information. This form must be filled out in its entirety and signed by an officer or agent empowered to contractually bind the respondent. This was a disqualifier if it comes in unsigned. So this is one that you will actually need to print out, sign, and you'll upload that back into the portal. Exhibit B is your vendor history and experience. This is where we want you to provide a detailed response to each question, detailing the vendor's history and experience in providing the products and services proposed. And we are going to give you a separate document that will allow for the expansion of that, of how you provide those services in a real instance. Exhibit C is your contract marketing and support plan. This is where we want you to provide a plan that describes adequately how you intend to market your contract and how you plan to provide support to the DIR customers should you be awarded a contract. All of these are very important. Please be sure you read them thoroughly and give yourself plenty of time to ask questions before your response is due so you can submit those questions for answers. And remember, there is a deadline for submitting the questions, so you'll want to read through all of that thoroughly, get any questions that you have, get those submitted before the deadline in the RFO for submitting those questions. Next slide, please. Hub Subcontracting Plan. I'm going to turn this over to Lynn and Teresa.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Stephanie. This is Lynn Hottie. I'm the Director of the Hub Program Outreach and Training, and we're going to discuss your Hub Subcontracting Plan and requirements. Next slide. So, for this RFO, you will be completing a Hub Subcontracting Plan and submitting that via bid stamp. You will complete that online in the bid stamp portal. You will print it, sign it, and upload that back in there, a copy of the signed HSP into the portal. And you all must do this. If you have any problems or any questions, you can reach out to my office and we can assist you with that. Next slide. So, the Hub Subcontracting Plan. It's a requirement that all respondents complete and submit a Hub Subcontracting Plan. Failure to do so will result in your response not being reviewed. So we don't want this to happen to you. If you have any questions about completing this, you can reach out to our office. You can ask how to complete Hub Subcontracting Plan questions. Our office will review your Hub Subcontracting Plan prior to the bid date. So we can review that ahead of time for you to ensure that you've completed that correctly. Now you need to do that at least 10 or more days prior to the close of this RFO. That gives us enough time to review it, and it gives you enough time to make any corrections should you need to. Now, make sure you, again, complete the form on Bitstamp, and there will be one of 3 ways in which you can complete the subcontracting plan. You can meet the goal via subcontracting with hub subcontractors. You can subcontract and not meet the goal, or you can self-perform. On the next slide, the hub goal for this RFO is 26%. That means if you subcontract to any other companies 26% or more of the expected value of this contract, you're meeting that hub goal. So you would complete method A. Ensure that you complete sections 1, 2, 4, and then method A, attachment A. And the totals for your subcontracting opportunities that you identify in section 2 need to equal the total of the percentages that you have identified in method A, attachment A. Now, should you have 2 or more subcontracting opportunities, you would complete multiple method A's. But in Bitstamp, it should allow you to do so. So again, if you have any questions with that, please contact us. Make sure that you include all VID numbers for each of your subcontractors. Make sure you include the estimated dollar amounts and percentages for each vendor. Remember, 2 + 2 is 4. I'm an Aggie, and it still is 4. So again, if you have any questions, contact our office. Next slide. If you're going to be subcontracting, but you're not going to meet that 26% hub goal, then you will complete method B. This will require that you solicit a minimum of 3 hub vendors and 2 minority trade organizations, and you have to allow them 7 working days for them to respond back to your solicitation. You can attach, as an additional attachment in Bitstamp, proof of your contacting those vendors and soliciting them, along with soliciting the minority trade organizations. So you'll want to keep documentation of that in case we ask for verification, or if you want to just go ahead and include that with your submission, you can. Next slide. Then you can also, the third and final method in which you would complete the HSP would be if you're going to self-perform, meaning you're going to keep everything in-house, you're not going to sub out any of the work to anyone, in which case you will complete sections 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in section 3, you're going to provide an explanation on how you intend to self-fulfill this contract. And when you do complete section 3, do not refer us to any other section of your response. We don't have access to that. So you need to just provide a brief summary that you have the employees, the skills, the finances, whatever, to fulfill this contract. And then ensure that you sign and date that HSP in section 4 and submit that. Next slide. So again, if you would like for us to provide you a complimentary review prior to the RFO due date, we can do that for you. But please get it to us at least 10 or more days prior to that closing. Again, that gives us enough time to review that. It gives you enough time to go back and make any corrections should you need to. We're not going to answer any other questions related to this RFO. What we can answer for you is yes or not, you completed the HSP correctly. If we see that you need to make any changes, if we see that your math doesn't add, we'll let you know, and you can do so and make those corrections and then submit that corrected form. So there is our DIR hub email, and then you also have my email and my phone number. But I suggest, since we are working remotely, that should you have any additional questions, reach out via email. It's the best way to contact us. Thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. And now I'll briefly go over bid package 2, 3, and 4, which includes your respondent engagement experience, and then the contract, sample contract, and then our standard terms and conditions. And this will be a high-level overview. It is expected that all vendors go and read the documents and be familiar with the documents so that you can ask the appropriate questions prior to the question and answer deadline, or the question deadline. And make sure that you understand the actual terms and conditions that you would be agreeing to should you receive a contract as a part of this RFO experience. Next slide, please. Bid package 2. This is the respondent engagement experience document. It is a multi-page document where we ask for each vendor to describe your approach to general business management by responding with to each overall requirement. Please read through this. Make sure you've responded appropriately. There is a 10-page limit for Section A. The Section A asks multiple questions, and it asks for multiple examples of where you provide these types of services. So we do limit that to 10 pages. We want to be able to read everybody's and read them thoroughly. And if we're getting a huge documents that are submitted, it just takes a lot longer to review and evaluate the responses. Section B of the respondent engagement experience is where the vendor would provide a detailed end-user IT outsourcing services submitted in the proposal. So whichever services that you're proposing, that is where you want to give as much information as possible so that we get a clear picture of what it is that you are proposing to do should you be awarded a contract. Next slide, please. So in the bid package 2, vendors are to provide 3 end-user IT outsourcing engagements initiated within the last 3 years. So we want examples of recent experience, real recent experience, not something that you plan to do. This is experience that you should have had within the last 3 years. If the vendor has less than 3, leave the remaining engagement blank. However, blank engagements will not be scored. They'll receive a score of 0. So the information must be provided for 3 separate engagements, which were initiated within the last 3 years when the work actually commenced, not when the contract execution date took place. So again, we're looking for real experience here in the areas that you're proposing to provide services through the RFO. Next slide, please. Bid package 3 and 4. Bid package 3 is a sample contract. The contract is the boilerplate. We will tailor it to the specific winning awards. So some of the information will change, but that is a standard boilerplate contract. And then bid package 4 is our standard terms and conditions for products and services contracts. You can take exceptions to items in the bid package 4, which is our standard terms and conditions. That is allowable in your Exhibit A. You must follow the directions in order for those exceptions to be considered. However, there are certain sections in the Appendix A standard terms and conditions that are noted as no exceptions may be taken at all. So if you try to take an exception for that area, DIR will decline that exception and it will not be considered. Please note that on exceptions, that if you propose too many exceptions to our terms and conditions, you will be disqualified from the process and we will not move forward with any negotiations. So if you are taking exceptions, we actually prefer that you do not take exceptions to that Appendix A, but if your agency feels there is a need to take exceptions, then the exception needs to be something that you just cannot enter a contract without, not just to change semantics or change some wording or to adjust something to where it's very, very specific to one particular incident. Those will not be considered. Any of the exceptions that you note cannot conflict with state law, statute, any rules or regulations that DIR is bound to or the Comptroller's Office is bound to. So many of our terms and conditions there's a statute or a rule behind it. So those are the ones that note that no exceptions will be taken, as well as some others. But DIR cannot enter into a contract that removes any sort of language or requirement that is part of statute that state agencies are bound to. Next slide, please. EIR accessibility forms in the bid package 5 and 6. So I will give a really high level overview of this, that these are services. So for the most part, the VPAT and the PDA, the VPAT and the VATSR will not be required. We do ask that the vendors, go ahead and the next slide, please, I'm sorry. We do ask that vendors complete the PDAA, bid package 5, and submit that back. VPAT, the voluntary product accessibility template, is only applicable when you're selling product. This is services, and so that's not fully applicable on this RFO. And the accessibility development services questionnaire bid package 8, that is required for you, the services that you're proposing. So do complete that package and bid package 5. VPAT is not, bid package 6 is not necessarily going to be applicable to vendors proposing on this. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the PDAA form is to, one, for compliance. Texas agencies and institutions of higher ed are required to procure or develop accessibility offerings. And so gaps in vendor internal governance systems and leadership commitment inhibit the ability to meet these standards for their products or services. And so we as an agency, DIR, make every effort to enter into contracts that provide accessible products. Again, since this contract is going to be mostly services, that there may be areas in that form that do not apply to what you're offering. That is fine. Please complete the form to the best of your ability as well. Next slide, please. So the accessibility forms, the EIR forms that come in from you all, they're reviewed internally, and they're viewed for credibility. And what we're looking for is that you all have thought of the offerings that you're proposing and have made some sort of best effort to make sure that those offerings are accessible to our customers who would be making the purchase. So we as an agency have an internal reviewer, which is Jeff Klein, and he reviews all the documents to make sure that they're credible. They don't have to be 100% accurate as far as, oh, just a second. Sorry, I was trying to turn something off there. So they don't have to be 100% accurate, but you do have to make a best effort to complete those forms that are applicable to you all and your offerings. Let's see, I'm going to kind of skip over part of this since I am not the subject matter expert on VPAT and PDAA, but we do have a training on, if you go to the DIR website and you look at on the DIR calendar, I do want to direct you all to this. So if you go to dir.texas.gov, and click on the calendar at the top. What date is that? I think it is Monday. So if you scroll down through the calendar on Monday, October 9th, there is a procurement and digital accessibility training that you can register for, and that training is presented by Jeff Klein, where he will be able to provide the information in general for the accessibility and what that means. And that's a really good presentation to attend, and it's virtual, so anybody can register for that. Let's see. Next slide, please. And the Vpap form is, again, it's not going to be applicable for the majority of you all, so we're going to skip over that at this moment. It shouldn't be applicable for anybody because this is all services. Next slide, please. And next slide. One more. So for additional information regarding EIR, there is a website or a link on the DIR website for EIR, and then there's a PDAA maturity model. There's some information there that goes into more detail. Again, I would recommend that as many as possible register for the accessibility training that will be provided next week through DIR, and go to that webinar and hear all about it, and you can get your questions answered directly from Jeff Klein there. Next slide, please. Vendor reference questionnaire. Next slide. So we do ask that you have 3 different references, at least 3 different references. 3 is all we'll look at, that submit on your behalf to show that they have done business with you, and then they will give you a ranking. So the vendor, we ask that you provide the reference form to your reference, but the form actually has to come back from your reference directly to DIR and not through the not through you all. It won't come in as a part of your response. It'll come outside of your response. So your reference questionnaire, we have those loaded in VIS, and you can send it from VIS to companies that you want to fill out the form on your agency's behalf. And then they will send, the reference form gives them an email box to email that back to DIR, and those come to myself and Scott Wilson. And the other people on the procurement services team will get the vendor responses, and we'll add those to your proposal. Please note that there are instructions included in bid package 7 on how to send out those vendor reference forms. DIR is not responsible for undeliverable emails or non-responsive references. So if your reference doesn't ever send the form back, that's not anything that DIR is going to follow up on and try to resolve. The vendor may not submit the reference form on behalf of their reference. That does need to come directly from them. And they do need to use the form that is provided and not a separate just letter of recommendation. Okay, next slide, please. We have a sample of the vendor reference form. So the top portion, if you're submitting this directly from Bidstamp, from VIS, obviously you're not able to fill in the top portion of that. So it is okay for the entity that is filling out the form on your behalf to fill out the vendor name and the product information that they did. You may want to give them a heads up in an email or give them a call and let them know what portions they're supposed to fill out. You may also want to follow up with them to make sure that they sent the form back into DIR. There is a deadline for that, and it's the same deadline as when the RFO is due. The same time, date, and day for when the RFO response is due, your proposal is due, the vendor reference forms are also due. Any forms that are later than that, DIR will not consider. If you have more than 3 agencies submit back, we'll take the first 3 that they submitted as your references. Next slide, please. Evaluation criteria. Next slide. So in RFO section 4.1, there is some information on how DIR will evaluate the responses. Incomplete response packages will be rejected. The financial review and the HSP, the Hub Subcontracting Plan, are part of the pass-fail basis. Our financial review, we have an internal review that goes out and checks for financial stability. And if you score a low score on Duns and Bradstreet, then it's not recommended to move forward with a contract award due to insufficient financial stability. And the HSP, really, you have a lot of opportunity to get a good HSP in beforehand, and to make sure that everything on your Hub subcontracting plan is complete. So we should not fail you due to lack of HSP. If you do not submit a Hub subcontracting plan at all, then that is an automatic fail. But if you submit something, the Hub department will work with you. You have opportunity to ask them questions specifically about the Hub subcontracting plan before it is due. So please take advantage of that. We don't want to not allow your response to move forward to the final evaluation and negotiation due to technicalities. Other parts of section 4.1 include the DUNS number is a requirement, which is your if you do not have one, you need to follow the process in order to get a DUNS number. I believe there's brief instructions on how to do that. And then whenever we evaluate the proposals, they are given a score based on a combined weighted evaluator score, meaning we have multiple evaluators and different segments are weighted. And so your combined score ranks you, and we have a cutoff. And it's dependent on each RFO, so I can't actually tell you what the cutoff number is, but we have a what we call competitive range. If you score within that competitive range, then your proposal moves forward to the next step, which are final negotiations, and if those negotiations are successful, and then to contract award. So you need to put your best foot forward. This is a competitive process, and you are scored by evaluators. So the top tier will get to move forward to the next stage. If you don't score high enough, your process stops there, and you're notified that your proposal did not meet the minimum requirements to move forward. So what are some of those requirements? In section 4.2 of the RFO, it goes over the percentage that will be weighted within the RFO evaluation. So your past engagement experience, that exhibit bid package 2, is 50% of your total score. So it counts a lot. Your vendor's contract marketing and support plan is your next big ticket item, and that is 30% of your overall score. So those two items can make or break your proposal, because that is 80% of the total score. The conformity with the End-User IT Outsourcing Services terms and conditions, you get 10%. You get the top score if you don't take any exceptions. If you take exceptions, the percentage starts coming down. Vendor history and experience and vendor references is 5%. So that is one of your exhibits. I think it's A. And then your respondent that's B, and your respondent information is another 5%. So that's what we look at and evaluate when we score. That does not mean that just because it's not in that evaluation criteria that it's not a required document. And we'll go over the mandatory documents in just a minute. Next slide, please. Next slide. So as far as general information and bid submittal, so how do you get your bid into DIR? That's going to be through our bid stamp portal, and then other general information. So whenever you are asking questions, either in the chat or whenever you submit them through the vendor information system, in order for us to be able to address your actual question, please reference the RFO page number and the section when submitting questions, or if you're asking a question about the any of the contents, please reference what section you're talking about. The webinar participants, you guys may submit questions electronically anytime during the webinar. Please use the Q&A tab to do that. And then again, a reminder, we will take a little quick break. We'll do an internal discussion of some of the questions that come in, but any of those questions that we answer after we come back from the break, those are going to be unofficial, and then until they're posted on the Electronic State Business Daily in that addendum. Remember to check the ESBD often for updates, and then all questions, including those submitted at this webinar and through the VIS portal, those questions, any question that you have for the RFO is due to received by DIR no later than October 19th, 2 p.m. Any questions that come after that, DIR has discretion as to whether or not we would include that in our addendum for the question and answer. Okay, next slide, please. So some disqualifying information. If you fail to sign the vendor information form, the Exhibit A, that stops your process there. It's an automatic disqualifier. If you failure to complete the financial information, which includes the DUNS number, that is also a disqualifier. Failure to complete a hub subcontracting plan and submitting the hub subcontracting plan automatically disqualifies. Failure to submit on or before the due date and time. This is electronic submission, so if you don't get it submitted in time, then the system actually will not allow you to submit it. It will look like it still allows for a little bit because your portal is still active, but you will not be able to hit that submit button after 2 p.m. on the due date of the Rfo. The other disqualifying item, and this is not negotiable, is contact with DIR employees regarding this Rfo other than the designated contacts. I am the designated contact for the overall Rfo. So if you are planning on responding to this Rfo, you cannot shop around to other DIR employees for questions, for guidance, for any sort of information, because all of that gets back and I document that, and then I document that there was a violation of the Rfo. It's actually specifically written in the Rfo, and it's in the comptroller's procurement manual and guide that is prohibited. So there's two different places that's documented that's prohibited, and it also documents that offenders of that will be disqualified from the entire process. So this is an open and active Rfo as of October 9th. The only person that you're able to communicate with about the Rfo is myself. We do have a couple of exceptions. One is Hub. You may contact Hub for their portion. And then you may also, if you're having issues with getting into Bidstamp and I set up a ticket for you, you can talk with the person from our IT support just on your Bidstamp issue and getting that resolved. Okay, so how do you get your bid to us? Let's see. Next slide, please. I just covered that pretty thoroughly. And the next slide gives the exceptions to anybody that you may talk to. So it's myself, Stephanie Harrison, Lynn with the Hub Department, and then if you have questions about EIR, you may contact Jeff Klein only about the EIR portion. Bid submittal. Next slide, please. So we've talked about Bidstamp, we've talked about the vendor information system. What exactly is that? That is our electronic response system. So before anybody can submit their proposal, you actually have to go in and set up an account. In order to set up an account, please give yourself some time because there's a manual process on the back end. It's not an automatic immediate response on the account where that account is verified. So we're not getting bots and robots in there going in and setting up fake accounts, and we're also not getting hopefully we're eliminating some fraudulent activity by having a live person on the back end doing some verification on that. The response time is about 48 hours for you to get your credentials back. So please go into the bid. If you're planning on responding to this, get your account set up now in the vendor information system. And then in a couple of days, business days, not weekend included, then you will get your credentials to actually go in and log into that account. Next slide, please. Any person with a disability who needs an accommodation under the ADA who is planning to respond to the solicitation, please contact the point of contact in section 3.1 of the Rfo, which is myself, and allow a few days for a response for that so we can see what we need to do in order to get you an accessible accommodation outside of the automated response process. Next slide, please. So on the DIR website, in order to create your vendor account through the vendor information systems, you'll need to go to the DIR website, which is dir.texas.gov, and then the link is down here at the bottom. View information for vendors, and then you'll come to a landing page. And on that landing page, you'll have an option to click on Open Solicitations. Next slide. And next slide. And let me backtrack just a minute. This is what your landing page will look like after your account is set up. So in order to request your account, you're still at that dir.texas.gov, and you will go into the DIR, the Bidstamp vendor login page, and you will request an account. So you sent in your email address and some basic information, and then that comes to our person in IT on our end, and then they will go in, and once they verified that, they will send you the login information. This process right here is after your account is enabled. For additional steps on the real step-by-step of how to get to this page here, there is a link with a video instruction on the DIR website, which is on the information for vendors page. If you scroll towards the bottom, it has the Bidstamp video and tutorial that you can follow, along with the Bidstamp troubleshooting handbook. This page is to show you how to get your solicitation in. So once you have your account and you're set up, then you go into the create a new response. You're going to click on the RFO number that you're interested in. This particular RFO is DIR CPO TMP 442. Any RFO that we have posted that's active and available for response will show up in that list. Currently, this is the only RFO, so this is the only one that should show up in your list. Go ahead, next slide, please. So this page will display the important deadlines for the solicitation and list any questions that you have submitted as the vendor. So this is a place down at the bottom there where it says RFO questions. There is a link where you, not a link, it's a text box that you go in and enter your questions. And then when you submit that question, those questions come in on our end, and we see the questions that everybody submits. You see the questions that your account submits, but you're able to keep up with that that account internally and kind of review those questions. It does not show any answers that we get back, because any of the answers will go in the addendum notification. Also on this page, you're going to have the actual start date of the RFO, the deadlines for the question submission deadline, the time and date that the response is due for that particular RFO, and any other like general RFO information. So it's just kind of a snapshot of the information for the RFO that you have clicked on the link to look at. Next slide, please. So when you're creating a new response for DIR for the vendor information system, you're going to want to go to the RFO button, and then that will get you to the right page. And then you're going to hit respond to solicitation or review responses to create a new response or view a response that is in progress. If the response has already been created or started, it will read as view response and allow you to resume your progress on any existing RFO response. The ask a question button there does just that, ask you a question up to the deadline. And then subscribe to solicitation is another option that you have where you can kind of watch a solicitation that you might not be planning to respond to, but you just kind of want to keep tabs on it, and you subscribe to that, and then you'll get certain notifications when like dates change and things like that. And then view solicitation documents will navigate to that links to the ESBD. And you can go there, and that's where all of the official documents for the RFO are posted. We have links on our DIR website, but those are courtesy links. The actual RFO is posted on the Electronic State Business Daily, and it is up to each vendor to go in and make sure that they have the most updated information in order to respond to. Next slide, please. I apologize in advance. This slide is a little bit busy, but this is the slide within the vendor information system portal where you actually start compiling everything for your solicitation response. So the RFO response, this is the RFO response page. You have several buttons in here. The delete deletes all information that has been uploaded to the response record before response has been submitted. And that is a full-on delete button. It does not delete one section or what you just did. It deletes the entire response that you've been working on. So you must be certain that you want to hit delete before you hit delete. Once a response is submitted, that delete button is actually not activated anymore. You must actually contact, you can withdraw the submission, but when you withdraw it, then you're out of, if it's past the deadline, you cannot resubmit. The submit button just does that. It submits the response record and all associated information with it. So if you submit the record before you have everything uploaded and it's still open, you can go back in and hit the withdraw button, but you got to start over again. You got to start over on your upload. So delete and submit are two buttons that you need to be really sure that you're ready to hit either one of those before you utilize them. Ask a question, we've been over that one. That's where you can send the questions into DIR. The add or edit, the Hub Subcontracting Form, allows you to do just that. You can, on the Hub Subcontracting Form, you'll complete the form online, but you also have to print a copy of it and then upload the copy as one of your attachments, your Rfo Response Documents, because it does have to be signed. This particular RFO, it does not have a pricing form. That is your vendor engagement experience document. So you will not have to create a pricing form for this because this is all statement of work based type services. Your new Rfo response documents, that is the where you upload the files indicated in the RFO. On the DIR website, again, I referenced that Bitstamp user manual. There is sections that will walk you through even more screenshots on there. I recommend people to go in and actually print a copy of that Bitstamp user guide, because it's kind of your it's your blueprint, so to speak, to make sure that you're responding to the solicitation and that you have everything that you need in order to get make sure that your response is a credible response that is received by DIR and is able to move through all the phases. That last one there on that list is the vendor references, and that is where you can send the vendor reference document to the entities that you want to receive the vendor reference form on your behalf. It does not give you any updates as to whether they ever send that back in or not. It's just sending them the copy of the form instead of you taking the form out of the bid packages and emailing it to them. This just sends it to them for Bitstamp. You also do not get a notification if there's any sort of bounce back. So I recommend you follow up with whoever you're sending the reference form to and make sure that they received it. Next slide, please. All right, and we're almost done into our break point. So mandatory submission requirements. We've been over some of this already, but this is included in section 3.7.1 of the RFO. You must provide the items listed below or the response will be rejected. This includes your Exhibit A, which must be signed. Exhibit A, cancel contracts, attachment 1 and 2, if applicable. Exhibit B, your vendor history and experience. Your Exhibit C, contract marketing and support plan. Your Exhibit D, signed Hub Subcontracting Plan. Your bid package 2, respondent engagement experience. Your bid package 6, which is the PDAA. Any licensing or service agreements, most of these may be service agreements, and your bid package 8, which is the Edgar certification form. The addendum that gets posted may make some modifications to any sort of requirements. It is the vendor's responsibility to check that, and if anything has been added to the list of mandatory submission requirements, that is the vendor's responsibility to abide by anything that is maybe added by the addendum. All right, next slide, please. We're going to take a quick break to give you all an opportunity to submit questions through the Q&A section in your control panel. We will review and address some of those questions now. Again, any answers that are given today are unofficial until they're posted on the ESBD in the form of an addendum. And then please remember, after the webinar, you have the opportunity, and we encourage you all to submit additional questions through the VIS system. Okay. And we will see you back here at 3:14. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're going to go through some of the questions and give unofficial answers to as many as possible. We won't be able to get through everybody's question, but they will be accounted for and updated in the addendum, as well as any questions that you submit through BidStamp. Please remember that if you've actually already have an account set up because you've either responded to or have followed a solicitation previously in BidStamp, you do not need to set up a new account. If you've forgotten your password, you can have that reset. But if you already have an account with your email, you do not need to set up a new BidStamp account. It's the same account. Let's see. We'll get started here with, let's see. Scott, were you able to get to some of the questions here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you ready for me to start reading them?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first question, will this contract be available to be used for computer software programming?
And so this contract is for the services that are listed specifically in the RFO. If it's not specifically for standalone computer software programming only, that's a different contract vehicle. But if you need to program the computers that the customer already has to do some sort of reset there, that is one of the services that is within the scope of the RFO. Next question.
Okay, next question. I'm sure you've been asked this a lot today, but I'll ask anyways. How many incumbent vendors are there, and how many awards to DIR, how many awards does DIR intend to make this cycle?
So we currently have 12 active vendors that have this contract vehicle. There were more when it initially was awarded, but several of them either were not renewed or expired. But we currently have 12. We don't know at this point how many we expect to award. It is a multiple award contract because these are master contracts that are utilized by our customers. And we have several thousand customers that purchase off of DIR. So we do expect multiple awards, but I don't have an exact number as how many. Next question.
Okay. How many end users would they be supporting?
Again, that's going to be dependent on the SOW that goes into effect with the customer. The customer determines how many end users that they need. It can be anywhere from a small agency like DIR. We have 210 employees to where you may be working for supplying services to a larger agency like HHSC that may have thousands of employees. So it's dependent on the customer and what sort of services that they have outlined in their statement of work. Next question.
The RFO Package 1 indicates that this RFO is for services only, yet there are numerous references to vendor-owned equipment and leasing. Please confirm this RFO does not include any hardware or software to be leased by the vendor.
So this RFO is what is commonly known as seat management. And one of the services that can be provided during seat management is the leasing of hardware and software. It's just not, it's where the vendor would come in and the customer goes into agreement with them to lease out the computers, their desktops, and then after the lease expires, the vendor comes and takes everything back. So that is one of the services that is allowed. The customer is not purchasing the equipment from the vendor. It can be either vendor-owned equipment or the vendor can be providing services on customer-owned equipment, but they're not buying any hardware or hardware equipment directly from the vendor. We have other contract vehicles for the hardware purchases. Next question, please.
Is it required that bidders support all work categories as defined in section 2.1 of the RFO? Or may bidders propose to support only some of the categories listed?
The vendors can propose some or all. So you don't have to propose everything in there, but you do need to propose services that you have actually experienced providing. And that's part of the vendor engagement response. Next question, please.
Okay, will the recorded webinar be available to attendees?
Currently, I don't believe so. That may change. I have to check with our webmaster to see if that's a possibility or not. If it will, it would be posted on the DIR website. But currently, we do not post these. Next slide, please.
Who is currently providing these services?
So we currently have 12 vendors that provide these services. You can search for those on the DIR website. Let's see. We have OES Lancer LLC, Vintage Computer, Vintage IT Services, SHI Government Solutions, CBM Archives, GTS Technology Services, Cirrus Computer Solutions, Electro System Engineers, Webhead Technologies Incorporated, Unisys Corporation, Insight Public Sector, KST Data Incorporated, AT&T Incorporated, and that was the last one. So those are the current vendors that have contracts under the current RFO. Next question, please.
Okay. When will the RFO be available in Bitstamp?
It should already be available in Bitstamp. If it's not, I'll have to troubleshoot that later, but it was posted earlier today. Next question.
Okay. In RFO Bid Package 1, there is a reference to pricing sheet in Bid Package 2, yet there does not appear to be any pricing information in that document. And then there's a following question. What financial information is to be evaluated or pass-fail as referenced?
That may be just a section that got left in, but I don't know which section you're referring to in RFO Package 1. It's a multiple page document, but the Bid Package 2 is not pricing. That is the vendor engagement document, and that one is a required document. Next question, please.
If you are using a 1099 independent contractor to perform some of the services, does that count as a subcontractor?
That's a Lynn question. Lynn?
Yes. Next question.
Okay, next question. This is a little long one. Even though this RFO is for services only, and no hardware or software products may be sold through a contract resulting from this RFO, part of the scope of services is the provisioning of equipment. Could you clarify if you are looking for a utility computing model where we as service providers should make computing resources, and in parentheses, laptops, desktops, etc., servers, etc., as part of the services?
Yes, that is one of the options.
Okay, and there's also another second question. So all hardware related costs should be bundled in with the service rates.
Yes. And that would be developed in a statement of work depending on the customer's needs.
Okay.
Next question.
Will the elements of Section B in Bid Package 2 be available for access by other vendors?
So all of the solicitation documents that come in are not subject to open records request while the solicitation is open. However, after the solicitation closes and all awards have been made, anything that is provided to DIR is subject to open records request. If you have confidential or proprietary information, you need to mark your document as confidential or proprietary in order for that to be redacted before it's released for any sort of open records request. Next question, please.
In the Standard Terms and Conditions document, Section 9, Contract Administration, there is a reference to administrative fees in Section B, reporting and administration fee, but no definition of such fee. What is the administrative fee?
The administrative fee is a fee paid by our customers for doing business with DIR. It is a fee that is passed through the vendor, and the vendor pays that on behalf of the customer as a part of their monthly sales reporting. The administrative fee can vary from contract to contract. For this particular contract, it will be 0.75% of the sales. And should you be awarded a contract, we actually go over that in great detail in our vendor orientation and how those fees are calculated and paid to DIR. Next question.
When remote support options are available, are there any restrictions to provide these services from outside the United States?
Yes, and that's going to be dependent on the current federal and state regulations. So the vendors have to, of course, abide by any laws pertaining to that. Next question.
Will you post the list of attendees from today's webinar to see which other vendors expressed interest?
Yes, that will be a part of the addendum. Next question.
How will the financial pass-fail be assessed? Based on what criteria?
So that is listed in the RFO, the financial information, and what they're looking for is financial a score. I believe it's your Dun & Bradstreet score. Let's see. That's actually one of the, I was trying to find the page it's on. Just a second.
I think it might be page 24.
I think I just got there. So on page 24 of the RFO, section 4.2.1, it's a financial review of the DUNS number and basically your Duns Bradstreet score. Next question.
How long is the negotiation process typically? If a contract is awarded, what is the next step selling to state agencies?
The negotiation process can, the evaluation and negotiation process is usually a multi-month process. We try to get into negotiations about 6 weeks after the solicitation closes. And then that is it's a kind of a complicated process because a lot of that timing depends on how responsive the vendors are. We're working with multiple vendors, and so it is a process that may take anywhere from an additional 6 weeks to several months to finalize before it gets to a contract award. Once you have received a contract, then the next step is we go over things with you in a vendor orientation on how you can reach out to our customer base and begin working with them. I think we already answered the next question. What's the one after that?
And Stephanie, it's 3:29, just giving you an update on the time.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Okay, last question. Regarding bid package 2, specifically with 3 engagements, as well as bid package 7, vendor references. If a vendor is using subcontractors, will those subcontractors' engagements and/or vendor references be considered during the evaluation, or only the prime vendors?
If they were doing work for you as you were the prime vendor and they were your subcontractor, then yes, you can use that engagement. If they're doing it in and of their own outside of a contractual agreement with you as the prime vendor, then no, that would not be considered. And that's the answer for both. Okay, that was the last question we had time for, but all of these answers will be officially addressed and posted on the addendum 1. You have until October 19th to get any questions submitted through Bidstamp and the time and date that is located in the RFO. And all those questions combined with these questions will go forward and be put into a, excuse me, I got the hiccups in there, be put into a formal question and answer document in our addendum, along with the slides and the attendee list from this webinar. So let's see. I think there's a couple, if you click through a couple of slides, it gives the final Rfo schedule. There you go. That's just a reminder. And then the next slide is my information. I prefer you use Bidstamp for RFO specific questions, so those get all tallied in there. And please note that because it is an open solicitation, I'm very limited on answering one-off questions. They all need to come in the formal process so they can be answered formally. And that concludes our webinar for today. We thank you all for attending. Please be sure you get those questions in by the due date, and good luck to everyone.